What's going on, guys? Jay Rich here, and I wanted to talk to you guys for a minute about some of the most recent news that's been coming out in the NFL. Of course, as we know, there's been a lot of things going on, especially in regards to running backs. Running backs have been the topic of discussion for basically the past 3-4 days now, as we've seen all these different things come out about the recent free agent class. And obviously, Ray and I touched on these running backs months ago, talking about their contract situations, where they might end up, different landing spots, how they impact their team, how their team impacts their chances of getting an extension. And now we're kind of seeing some of that all come to fruition. We've seen the issues with Dalvin Cook, now Alvin Kamara. You see things like Leonard Fournette getting cut, and now obviously Joe Mixon getting that extension. So I just wanted to touch on some of these things for you guys to give you my thoughts and kind of how we see this landscape playing out over the long term.
You got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.
Now first, let's start with Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon got his contract. Honestly, props to him. Super proud of him. Joe Mixon is a guy that everybody loves, but no one's really seen him produce at the level we all know that he can produce at. But now he's got that. He's locked up in Cincinnati for the next 4 years with Joe Burrow, and he's good to go. He's good to go, right? He got that 4-year extension, $50 million. And we're hearing basically that now he's happy, he's ready to play, and it's full go. And that's one thing that owners were kind of banking on when you look at Mixon. When he's ranked in the top 12, I believe he was 6-7 overall in running back dynasty ADP. He's a guy who's going to get paid simply because Cincinnati can afford that contract. They don't have anybody else to pay Joe Burrow on a rookie deal. Lots of players still to kind of come into the fold to make them a contender. But Joe Mixon, obviously now, Cincinnati has proved he will be a staple in that offense going forward. He's expected to carry the load now that he's being paid $12+ million a year. And we expect to see that from Joe Mixon. So props to Joe Mixon for negotiating that contract, getting it done. But what does that mean for the other running backs? You look at running backs like Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, two guys that most people view as better than Joe Mixon, better producers, higher producers, more valuable to their team than Joe Mixon. So what are they expected to get? $15 million, $16 million like Christian McCaffrey got? We've heard reports already out of camp that Dalvin Cook is potentially thinking about holding out. We're not really too sure how it's going to play out. He's been at camp, he's been active, but at the end of the day, he needs to protect himself like many running backs do. Their lifespan is so short in the NFL. They can't afford to be wasting time getting hurt in their contract years. They need to make sure they get that money while they're valuable, because as we've seen with the Todd Gurleys, the David Johnsons, once they fall off the map, there's nothing left for them. They're basically left for dead. We saw Todd Gurley get cut with basically a $20 million dead cap hit, but the Rams said it's just not worth it to have this guy on our roster, so they got rid of him. Now, I'm going to touch on Dalvin Cook first because he's probably the most intriguing to me. Dalvin Cook playing for the Minnesota Vikings, we obviously know he's had that injury history, but last year he finally put it all together, had a stellar season, and is now looking for that extension. The Vikings, of course, as we know, are relatively cap-strapped. They're paying a lot of money out to Kirk Cousins and that defense. So is there room for them to extend Dalvin Cook? A lot of people seem to be on the fence about it. We're not too sure kind of what we expect. There's been a lot of different reports out of camp on Dalvin Cook's situation, whether or not he'll hold out. We've heard the hold in term a lot because guys have been at camp or inactive, like we've seen on Hard Knocks with Melvin Ingram. But what we really need to think about is, like, where does this leave fantasy owners? Where do we draft Dalvin Cook? Are we willing to take that risk in the first round? I would say no, personally. But if you can get Dalvin Cook in the second round, I don't think it's a matter of if he gets a contract, but when. And are we willing to stomach that in Dynasty for this season if he doesn't play? And of course, there's always the option to handcuff with Alexander Mattison. I think now, based off what kind of we're seeing with Dalvin Cook, Madison is a must-own if you're going to be willing to draft Cook. You have to be willing to reach for Madison. That way you get most of the production if Dalvin Cook doesn't play. And I just think that's a must in Dynasty, because then once Dalvin Cook leaves, if he leaves, then you still have Madison, and I just think that's the best way to kind of protect yourself if there's an eventual fallout with Dalvin Cook. Now, Alvin Kamara is a very interesting prospect, or interesting player, because there's not really an immediate guy other than Latavius Murray, and people aren't really buying Latavius Murray. They're not reaching for Latavius Murray. And there really isn't a player like Alvin Kamara out there on the market right now. To me, he's the most talented player. You can say that maybe it's due to the Saints offense, Drew Brees, Hall of Fame quarterback, the system, but Alvin Kamara is just a different beast. You know, you talk about him wanting $15+ million, kind of near the Christian McCaffrey range, and we've been seeing reports from Ian Rappaport and a few other guys that they're about $2 million apart right now. Now, we've seen this happen with Michael Thomas, where it was similar. They wanted to pay him around $18 million, but they were able to get him up to that 20 that he wanted. The issue with the Saints, obviously, like I mentioned previously, is that they have to sign Marshawn Lattimore and Ryan Ramczyk to extensions as well as Kamara. That's a starting offensive lineman who's very important. Ryan Ramczyk is one of the best offensive linemen in the league, and Marshawn Lattimore, their number one corner, who holds down Mike Evans, holds down DJ Moore, holds down Chris Godwin, whoever they need him to hold down, he's there. So you talk about that NFC South, you need to have a number one corner or you're going to get toasted every single week by those in-division rivals. So Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, in my opinion, are much more essential to the Saints' success than Alvin Kamara, especially when you think about that defense, how it's built. It's built for the long term, and they need to sustain that success to help that success going forward with whoever their quarterback is. They're not going to be able to lean on Alvin Kamara and an offense. They're going to have to build around that defense, and whoever quarterback comes in after Drew Brees, he needs to be a kind of run, protect the ball kind of guy. Hopefully not Jameis Winston, if we're talking about protecting the ball, but a guy who can just lean on that defense, score points, and then the defense basically takes care of business like they always do, like we saw when Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback in 2019. Now, obviously, there's still a lot to kind of figure out with all these different running back situations, and there's a lot that we can think about in terms of fantasy. Are we drafting Alvin Kamara? In my opinion, yes. You still draft Alvin Kamara in the first round because his upside is just crazy high, and obviously they're competing for a Super Bowl. They have a team that's ready to go to the Super Bowl, ready to compete, and with him being hurt last year, we know that he's hungry, and while he may hold out, I think the chances of him holding out are much less because of the team that he plays for. Now, when you talk about Dalvin Cook, they're not in the same position the Saints are in. They're not as good. They have a good roster, but they're probably not in, they're not definitely not in the same breath, at least, of the Saints as far as competing for a Super Bowl. So for him, the incentives are much less because he even knows that there's 5, maybe even 6 teams that are better than the Vikings in the NFC that could compete for the Super Bowl over those Vikings, right? And then obviously, we already talked about Mixon. Mixon, I think you need to draft a little bit higher now. He's kind of going in the mid-second of redraft leagues. And I think now it's about safe to take him in the first in a dynasty league. He has that extension. We all know that Joe Burrow is the next greatest thing in football, the next great quarterback. And if you believe in that and you believe in all the weapons around him, you need to take Joe Mixon in the first round because now he has that contract security we've all been waiting for. My personal belief is that Alvin Kamara is the safest player regardless of team. So when you talk about the most bulletproof player, no matter what team he plays for, it's Alvin Kamara and then Dalvin Cook for me. Now, I kind of buried the lead here, but Leonard Fournette got released, and how does that impact fantasy? Now, of course, yesterday we saw he got picked up by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and even this morning there's reports where Bruce Arians said, Ronald Jones is the guy. Don't worry about it. Leonard Fournette's just going to be another cog in the machine. We all know that's bullshit. You don't pick up Leonard Fournette and just tell him to ride the bench because even when he was coming out, there was a lot of reports saying that he was more worried about team fit than anything else. He was worried about volume and team fit, not money. Yes, he wants to compete for a Super Bowl, but he wants to be in a system where he will be utilized the way that benefits his skill set and hopefully get the volume to match that. Now, can Tampa Bay provide that? That's what we need to figure out. Ronald Jones obviously is the starter there right now, and it's going to take time for Leonard Fournette to kind of learn the offense. It may be a little bit slower, but the discount you can get for Fournette right now, in my opinion, is worth the risk. Because for all we know, he could take over in week 2, 3, 4. It's probably not going to happen week 1 with the season being next week. But you think about weeks 2, 3, 4, if Leonard Fournette can take over in the first month and you can get him in the 6th, 7th round of fantasy drafts, I think that's worth it because the upside for Fournette is absolutely massive. You go from a situation like Jacksonville where he's basically the only weapon with DJ Shark to now playing with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski in this crazy system that's going to score a lot of points by necessity. and they're going to be a dominant force in the NFL. I know most people projecting them to win, 12, 13 wins. Now they have Tom Brady. And Leonard Fournette's going to be a byproduct of that success. He's going to see touches in the red zone. He's going to see carries throughout the season. And I don't see a situation where he can't potentially have a massive TD upside. Even if he gets off to a slow start, there's still a chance he may see double-digit touchdowns over the long term. And that's where Fournette's upside is just so tantalizing to me. Even when he was on the Jags and I was saying, buy Leonard Fournette because he's going to be a value in drafts, I still think he can be a value. If you see him slipping to the 7th, 8th round, then I would definitely be looking at him as a potential RB3, RB4, or if you want to go 0 RB and take him early, the only issue is you may need to be willing to wait on him a little bit. That's the only fear with Fournette. How long are you willing to wait for that guy, and when is the right time to take him? Unfortunately, especially now, we don't have those answers, but I would say around the 6th, 7th, 8th round is where you want to target him, because before he was going kind of the 3rd, 4th round when he had a team on a roster, secured workload. Now that workload's a bit in question, but in my personal opinion, I think it's going to be there. I think the workload is completely secure, and he's going to get it. It's just a matter of time. He's better than Ronald Jones. Bruce Arians brought him in for a reason and paid him $2.5 million to do it with $4 million in incentives. I just think that Leonard Fournette's going to have a great year. It just may take a couple of weeks, and especially in your redraft leagues, if guys draft him and are impatient after a couple of weeks, he's the guy I'd be targeting on the waiver wire, because he could easily fall into a 3-touchdown game against a bad opponent where Brady just decides to hand him off the ball in the red zone rather than trying to pass it. And that's something we saw in New England a lot, is sometimes they just chose to pound the rock on the goal line rather than trying to pass it in the end zone all the time. And that's where I think that Leonard Fournette has massive TD upside. Honestly, that's one of the reasons why I want to take him. I've been a big proponent of Fournette all offseason, and I want to tell you guys that you need to get on the Fournette train. I know it's not easy. I know not everyone's on that train, but I think that, in my personal opinion, he could be an absolute league winner this season, especially when you talk about down the stretch. People keep talking about J.K. Dobbins could be a league winner. Jalen Reagor could be a league winner when he comes back. Hollywood Brown, all these guys that kind of take off in the second half. Maybe they get off to slow starts, but take off in that second half. Leonard Fournette is one of those guys. And with this uncertainty and all the things going on around him, I think he's worth it. I think he's worth that risk in redraft leagues. And in dynasty leagues, I've already been saying that I think he's going to get another contract. Obviously, now he's in Tampa Bay, but even when he was on the Jags, I said, if you're going to take Leonard Fournette, you need to know that he's going to get another contract, and he's going to be a staple in someone's offense. Now, we don't know where that's going to be right now, but in my opinion, you look at what happened here. He went to Tampa Bay when he got released in basically a couple of days. I could see a similar situation next offseason where all these different running backs are changing teams, and Leonard Fournette finds another great situation and decides to be a stud running back once again. Thank you guys for checking out this video. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/allgas. Follow me on Twitter at @ChaboyJRich for all the news, info, dynasty, and make sure you follow RayGQ on Twitter if you're not already. Thanks for checking out this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. A little bit of insight into some of the running back situations going on right now. Thank you again. Have a nice day. See you later. Peace.